Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Marissa Kozlov. It's great to have you with us for today's eMarketer Tech Talk, where we host guests from all areas of media, ad tech, and martech. Today, we'll hear new insights from DISQO's ad effectiveness benchmarks, including how top brands are measuring cross-platform success at every stage of the funnel. And sharing all of that great content with us is Sean Adams, Senior Vice President of Ad Measurement at DISQO, who's joining us today from San Francisco. Sean, nice to see you.
Thanks for having me, Marissa. Appreciate it. Nice
I'm
to see
really
you.
happy you're here today. This is going to be great. And we're so happy that those in our audience are also with us. And we'd love to hear where you're joining us from. So just use that chat window on the right to share that and also to submit any questions. Sean and I will do our best to get to as many of those as we can during the live Q&A in the second part of the show. But first, Sean is going to set things up with a short presentation, and then we are going to break it all down in a fireside chat. So Sean, I'm going to pass it to you.
Thanks, Marissa and eMarketer, and thank you to everyone for joining. We're very excited about this conversation, and I'm going to try my best to make benchmarks exciting for the audience here. So, as Marissa said, I'm Sean Adams. I'm the SVP of National Sales and Ad Measurement here at DISQO. And for those of you who don't know us, DISQO is an ad effectiveness measurement platform that enables brands and publishers to measure everything, including exposure to and engagement with advertising. Our identity-based ad platform is fueled by 30 million consumers who've opted in, so we're CCPA compliant, just a quick note there, to share experiences with our panel. They respond to surveys and share digital purchase journey behaviors via our proprietary mobile and desktop metering apps. With audience consent, we uniquely provide objective and single source measurement of post-ad exposure impacts on all brand KPIs like awareness, favorability, and purchase, as well as intent and behavioral outcomes, like search, site visits, and e-commerce activities included. This allows us to connect brand sentiment and performance outcomes for a complete picture. Our solution is fully cross-platform, including an objective single source methodology measurement of TV, linear, and CTV, digital and social media included, as well as legacy media. We eliminate the gaps and blind spots that currently plague our industry. Our products, Brand Lift and Outcomes Lift, are disrupting the ad effectiveness measurement landscape and are the fastest growing solutions in the market. Whether it's through our full service or self-service offerings, we provide expert support and partner closely with our clients to provide ad effectiveness. With our identity-based platform, which we own, we do this all without relying on deprecating identifiers like cookies or IP addresses. Now, let's dig into benchmarks. First, I want to set the stage for why we need benchmarks. They obviously allow us to approach media and planning strategically, so you can really kind of do four key things. We want to obviously make informed decisions is the first thing, and then the second piece is really set realistic goals for your ad effectiveness, and then third, we want to measure your success and then optimize your campaigns based on what you measure. This helps you continue making informed decisions and setting realistic goals, a flywheel for your advertising strategy, and really from a creative to a media planning basis. So what should you look at? What should you look for in a benchmark? So really kind of first thing is they should align with your overall strategy, your campaign objectives, brand identity, category, industry, and advertising approach. Right? The key for us is we want to look for benchmarks that feature recent data that come from an objective source with solid methodology and allow companies across various audiences and campaigns to scale. The third thing is we also look for metrics that cover the entire funnel and tie to the KPIs that your business is focused on. Because there are so many variables, it's crucial for brand marketers to think carefully about the characteristics they need before selecting a benchmark. So the key for us is, we want you to do your best to measure apples to apples rather than apples to oranges, and that's really what DISQO tries to provide. A little bit about DISQO's benchmarks before we dive in. Our data is collected directly from people with whom we have a first-party relationship. So as I mentioned at the outset, DISQO owns our audience. We also because of this, we can measure behaviors across platforms, devices, and channels, and even walled gardens like social media and retail networks, giving us a strong, obviously, cross-platform breadth and depth. Our metrics also focus on the entire funnel, from the top of the funnel awareness to mid-funnel favorability and consideration to bottom of the funnel purchase intent and online behaviors such as site visits, search, and e-commerce. And lastly, our benchmarks are based on campaigns measured since March 2021, reflecting consumer behavior that you're likely to see today rather than older benchmarks spanning, 10 to 15 years back. So that's a critical differentiator for us. As of Q4 2024, these benchmarks span over 1,600 campaigns. They cover 8 brand lift and 9 outcome lift metrics, broken out overall by our key demos, 4 major macro categories, 19 industries, and 25 sub-industries. So each benchmark release adds more categories as our client base expands. For our clients, we offer deeper cuts that include digital channels, additional demographic groups, frequency data, and more. These are the 8 brand lift and 9 outcome lift metrics we'll cover today. Our brand lift and outcomes lift study methodology calculates lift by subtracting the results of an unexposed group or control group from an exposed ad group. The benchmarks are determined by finding the median lift across all campaigns. Now let's get into why you're all here. And I'm going to try and make this as exciting as possible. It's a bit of an eye chart, so please bear with me here. Looking at the top of the funnel, awareness metrics, unaided awareness, aided awareness, ad awareness, and message association lifts tend to be lower. This doesn't mean awareness campaigns aren't working. What it does mean is it's simply shifting the baseline awareness, and it can take more effort and time to actually move that needle. That said, payoff often comes downstream. So in the mid-funnel metrics like familiarity, consideration, and favorability, generally we see higher lifts. So strong mid-funnel performance often aids in driving the metrics that require proactive consumer behavior like brand search, site visitation, and e-commerce. And I think it's key to remember here that the more specific the benchmark is to your brand situation, the more accurate it will be as a guide. That's why continuous measurement of your campaigns so that you can actually develop benchmarks specific to your brand is the ideal state. I think I want to add one thing here before we move to the next slide, and that is essentially that it's critical to actually normalize this based on your KPIs. So please use these metrics here, or this slide as a directional guide only. So, but without brand specific metrics, the closer you can get with your benchmarks and essentially looking in the mirror, the more accurate those benchmarks may be. So with that in mind, I want to dive into some category benchmarks for consumables, goods, services, and vehicles. If you look at the highlighted cells here, you'll see that each differs in areas where it excels, offering distinct recommendations for advertising strategies for each category. Let's talk about consumables. So consumables tend to perform better at the top and mid-funnel rather than overall benchmarks. This might be obvious to some of you, but a consumable brand should lean into favorability and purchase intent while tightening awareness metrics, brand awareness, recall, and consistent messaging to maintain and boost awareness and establish long-term loyalty. The next one here is goods. Goods often perform well at the top of the funnel and excel in outcomes lift metrics and online behavior, largely due to an easier online path to purchase. We advise clients in the goods category to focus on boosting ad and unaided awareness and overall brand visibility, guiding consumers from evaluation and preference to actual purchase. Services shows a strong performance in the middle of the funnel, which isn't surprising given the longer lead time from awareness to purchase. Focus on driving familiarity and favorability, ultimately pulling consumers through to brand conversion, such as search, site visitation, and e-commerce. Keep in mind that services ads can prompt consumers to shop around. So watch how your ads might lead them to actually check competitors as well. Vehicles is a challenging category because most consumers aren't in the market for a new vehicle. Capturing them at the right time requires a cohesive, thoughtful cross-platform strategy. We see strong category site visitation and competitive e-commerce visitation after ad exposure when it comes to vehicles. And for vehicles, being in the consideration set when someone is ready to purchase requires building strong upfront awareness and leveraging purchase intent through bold brand forward storytelling. Nurturing consumers through a lengthy consideration stage is also critical when it comes to vehicles. So now we get into brand maturity benchmarks, which are particularly interesting. We've color coded these benchmarks based on where each stage excels, as with the category benchmarks, as previously mentioned. Remember, these benchmarks aren't meant to say one group is better than the other. They show what you can reasonably expect based on your brand's maturity stage. This is just one variable in the overall formula of ad success. And here we have benchmarks for new, emerging, and established brands. New brands have baseline awareness of anywhere from 0 to about 33%. Emerging have 34 to 66%, and established brands have about 67 to 100%. So visually, you can quickly see the power of brand building. As awareness grows, you start to move people into the mid funnel. You grow it further, and you actually move people to take action based on your ads through that funnel approach. So these benchmarks also highlight the importance of focusing on the right metric. For example, a newly established brand may wonder why they're no longer performing as well in the middle of the funnel KPIs. If they're not also measuring how the advertising is fueling online behavior, they may consider their campaigns to be a failure. That's definitely not the case, but by expanding the funnel down, you can get a more accurate picture of your campaign's performance on actual behavior. So you need to look down the funnel as well. Focusing on new brands, higher than average lift in aided and ad awareness, though not necessarily an unaided awareness, plus strong brand-specific e-commerce lift. It's all about building recognition so that you can move to the next awareness tier. Emerging brands in the next area here, the strength is typically in the mid-funnel, familiarity, favorability. Keep building memorable creative that leaves a lasting impression and continues to grow top of the funnel awareness and credibility. Guiding consumers from recognition to deeper engagement and really intent. And in established brands, they tend to over-index on unaided awareness. This might not be surprising. So personalizing campaigns, protect consumer loyalty, and find ways to stand out in a crowded market are all critical in the established brand segment. So key takeaways here are really kind of the three big ones, and that's context matters, right? While overall benchmarks are useful, tailor expectations to your brand's category, industry, and the maturity stage. The second one here is make measurement continuous. This might be obvious, but develop benchmarks specifically for your brand by always measuring performance. Over time, you'll see what works and your unique circumstances will apply there. And I think third is apply benchmarks dynamically. Benchmarks are a starting point, but they're not the final verdict. So let them guide you in ongoing campaign optimization from creative strategy to audience targeting. If you want a deeper dive, DISQO also offers 3 flavors of benchmarks, one of which is overall benchmarks. like those covered today. The second one is social media specific benchmarks, which we release as well, and CTV specific benchmarks. Those are all available for download in the webinar platform today. And Marissa, I'm going to go back to you.
Sean, thank you so much for that great content, that overview on benchmarks and teeing up the conversation that you and I are about to have. As Sean just mentioned, the benchmark reports that he is sharing on the screen are available within the resources tab. So just click that on the side of the screen. You can find all of those reports from DISQO, which is really great. So Sean, I'm really looking forward to diving deeper into some of these topics with you. So let's first start off with some of the fundamentals of benchmarking. There are so many industry benchmarks out there. What should marketers look for to ensure that they're working with benchmarks that are both credible and relevant to their unique campaigns?
It's a great question, Marissa, and I think that I think it really starts with making sure that your benchmarks are as close to your reality as possible. I think I was hitting on some of those slides above where we want to make sure that this is directional for most. That means looking beyond the broad industry averages and actually finding benchmarks that reflect your category, your audience, and your unique channel mix. For example, a retail campaign targeting Gen Z on social media will perform differently than a CPG campaign running across CTV and digital display. And so your benchmark should reflect those nuances. And I think it's also important that benchmarks align with your campaign objectives. If you're running a brand campaign, you'll want metrics that span the full funnel, not just bottom line outcomes. The most useful benchmarks, I think, are those that are granular, cross-platform, and multi-funnel. So siloed benchmarks are no better than siloed measurement when you're trying to evaluate a holistic multi-touch campaign. So ultimately, benchmarks should be grounded in current, diverse data sets that help you really set a smarter expectation and guide optimization, and not just to validate results.
That's a great feedback right there. Well, when you talk about benchmarks, we're often thinking of this quote unquote standard number to go off of. How should brands interpret performance that's either above or below a benchmark? So when is it worth digging in further, and when might it reflect just a difference in something like category, creative, or audience?
It's always a smart practice to practice your question and question your results. I mean, I think that the one thing we see with most of our partners is whether they're above or below the benchmark. All of the results are relative, right? So if performance is significantly different than expected, the first step is really to assess whether the benchmark itself is truly reflective of your brand, your category, your creative, and your campaign strategy. I think sometimes a variance simply is the result of comparing against the wrong peer set. So I think it's important to actually level set there. That said, when you see meaningful deviations, especially underperformance, it's worth a deeper dive with your media and your agency partners, because we work closely with agencies who do this kind of analysis continuously. And by keeping an eye on the benchmarks throughout the campaign life cycle, they're able to actually identify issues early, and they can make in-flight optimizations as the campaign goes on. That kind of agility really helps ensure that even if the results are below expectations, the final outcomes are much closer to where they need to be. And I can't stress that enough. Benchmarks are a guide. It's not a judgment, but they're only useful if you're ready to ask why performance differs and you're ready to take action accordingly.
I like that. A guide, not a judgment. So, with that said, help us understand that a bit more. How do you recommend marketers use benchmarks to optimize and not just to validate?
Yeah, they should really be. I think benchmarks should be a launch pad, right? It's not a finish line. The goal isn't just to meet the average; it's actually to exceed it, right? So that's why we encourage an always-on measurement mindset. Similar to your media campaigns, evergreen works. So when you're continuously measuring performance across campaigns, you build a reliable baseline of expected outcomes, and you gain the ability to spot when something is underperforming or simply just meeting the norm. But the opportunity comes when you start asking questions like how can we outperform ourselves by treating benchmarks as directional guardrails rather than static KPIs. So I think marketers can identify optimization opportunities mid-flight. They can test new strategies, ultimately push beyond the average into exceptional, and that's really what continuous benchmarking helps prove the value, right? It improves over time, and that's really what we're after.
Yeah, well, I'd love if you could share maybe a real world use case. That's something our audience always loves. What's an example of how your clients have used these benchmarks to optimize performance?
Absolutely. One great example comes from our work with Havas Media Network on a campaign for Josh Wine-Cellars. Havas is a great partner of ours, and the brand wanted to understand not only whether their holiday advertising drove awareness, but how it impacted favorability, consideration, and ultimately purchase intent across their adult beverage audience. So they used DISQO's cross-platform brand lift measurement, and they discovered that while awareness was important, the biggest lift came mid-funnel in brand favorability and consideration. These insights enabled the team to refine their audience targeting and really shift the media dollars toward channels that were actually outperforming benchmarks like CTV and OLV. They also learned that ad frequency beyond 6 exposures showed diminishing returns, which helped them optimize reach rather than oversaturation. And this wasn't just post-campaign reporting. It was an example of real-time learning, and they really were able to adjust on the fly. So really, by continuously comparing campaign performance to relevant benchmarks, they were able to make smarter media mix and frequency decisions mid-flight. It also helped them ultimately to improve performance across KPIs that really mattered most to their business.
Oh, I love that, how they were able to alter almost in the moment. So thank you for sharing that with us, and great brand. I'm sure many of us are familiar with that one. I have a few questions for you on cross-platform measurement and also DISQO's methodology. Can you share a bit more with us about why cross-platform measurement is critical for accurate benchmarks and how DISQO is able to measure across the platforms?
Yeah, sure. So cross-platform measurement is critical because consumers don't experience ads in silos. I mentioned earlier, if you're not looking at the full picture or seeing the full journey, measuring in silos just simply won't cut it anymore. So you need to understand the total impact of a campaign across all of the places your audience sees and interacts with your brand. So at DISQO, we're able to do that because we have a direct relationship with our panel of more than 30 million consumers, as I mentioned at the outset, who've opted in to share both attitudes and their behaviors. So that means that we can field traditional brand lift surveys asking questions like awareness, favorability, and intent, but also have a subset of members who've installed our metering apps on their devices. And this lets us directly observe ad exposure and what people do afterward, like search for a brand, visiting a site, or even making a purchase. So because we're capturing this across platforms like TV, CTV, social, digital, even retail media, we can see exactly how many exposures someone had before taking action across which channels and at the frequency that you actually set in your campaigns. So that makes what benchmarks or that makes our benchmarks and insights truly actionable. It's not modeled or pieced together. It's deterministic, it's deduplicated and holistic. So without that, you're really optimizing in a vacuum and flying blind.
Well, thank you for that. I also imagine that there are some common pitfalls that folks can come across when they're interpreting things like lift metrics. So what would your suggestion be when clients are evaluating campaign performance, especially when they're comparing across different media channels or audiences? What are some pitfalls that they should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, so one of the most common pitfalls we see is comparing lift metrics at face value without accounting for context. I guess if I haven't mentioned it enough, please focus on your specific examples. And the example that I would highlight is a 1 point lift might seem small, But for an established brand with already high awareness, that could actually be a huge win. So on the flip side, new brands might show double-digit lift more easily because they're starting from a lower baseline. So another mistake is comparing lift across platforms without adjusting for differences in audience composition or the role of the funnel. Some platforms are better at driving awareness. Others are stronger at mid or low funnel outcomes. So that doesn't mean one underperformed. It just means that each played its role or part in the funnel. And then lastly is really metrics don't exist in a vacuum. Frequency, creative quality, and media context all play a role in outcomes. So that's why we always encourage clients to look at lift as part of the bigger picture, not just a number on a slide, but a signal to guide really smarter decision making.
Well, that's very helpful. I know people are always thinking about, what is one thing that I should be considering as I start to look at performance. So thank you so much for that. During your presentation at the top of the hour here, you went through the few stages of the brand maturity. And one thing that I thought was really interesting was that for the new brands, you noted that there were stronger lifts in awareness metrics. And what is the reasoning behind that? And what does the pathway look like for moving from strong awareness to mid-funnel performance?
Yeah, it's actually pretty straightforward. Newer brands tend to show stronger lifts in awareness and metrics because they're starting from a lower baseline. Most people simply haven't heard of them yet. So any exposure has the potential to move the needle in a meaningful way. But here's the key. Without a solid foundation of awareness, it's hard to drive consistent mid-funnel performance. You can't build consideration or favorability if consumers don't know who you are. So for new brands, the priority should be building that top of funnel awareness first. That's what fuels mid-funnel activity by expanding the pool of people who are even eligible to consider or engage more deeply with your brand. That doesn't mean that you won't see any mid-funnel lift as a new brand. Some audiences may already be aware and ready to move, but scale comes from getting more people into the funnel in the first place, and that's really kind of a critical first step.
Right. Okay. So awareness first before anything else. When you look at those established brands, you noted seeing high unaided awareness, but also lower incremental lifts. I think that was within the chart that you shared with us. How should these established brands be thinking about measurement strategies that reflect a more mature relationship with their audience?
Yeah, it's similar to what we see with new brands, just from the other end of the spectrum. Established brands already have strong baseline awareness, so driving incremental lift at the top of the funnel is naturally going to be more challenging. That's not a failure; it's just the reality of brand maturity. So what these brands should focus on instead is how they're moving consumers through the funnel. That means shifting, measurement priorities toward mid and lower funnel, which is favorability, consideration, and intent. And most importantly, real world behaviors, right? Because as people are searching for really, are people searching for the brand? Are they visiting the site? Are they making a purchase? And I think that at this stage, brands need measurement strategies that go beyond traditional attitudinal metrics and surface level platform KPIs like clicks or impressions. They need a holistic view of what ties exposure to actual outcomes. That's the only way to prove not just that people are seeing your ads, but that brand equity is turning into real business results.
Well, so you just mentioned brands moving through different stages of the funnel. What are your thoughts on this one? Should brands shift their campaign objectives as they move from one maturity stage to another? How should their priorities evolve?
Yeah, definitely. So I think as a brand matures, both its advertising objectives and its measurement strategies need to evolve. This might be obvious, but when you're a new brand, success might mean, building awareness and name recognition. But as you grow, expectations change. It's no longer just about visibility. It's about driving deeper engagement and real consumer action. So I think that's why it's critical to shift measurement focus as you move through the maturity curve. You need to move beyond top of the funnel metrics and really start capturing things like consideration, purchase, intent, site visits, search behavior, and actual sales outcomes. And to do that, you need to measure, you need a measurement partner that can actually track performance consistently across channels and platforms. So you're not left stitching together, siloed data. And I think a lot of advertisers and marketers out there, that tends to be the case because they're getting data from disparate sources. So at the same time, your media strategy is also getting more complex. So omni-channel campaigns, frequency management, creative sequencing, it all becomes more sophisticated. So working with an agency and measurement partners who really can adapt, right, and optimize in real time and help translate that data into decisions really becomes even more important. So as your brand grows, your campaigns need to do more, and really your measurement approach has to keep pace and evolve at the same time.
All right, well, helpful tips as those stages progress. Thank you. I want to ask you a little bit more about the correlation between brand and performance marketing, because these are often seen as separate, but your benchmarks actually show that they are very much connected. Can you give an example of how a strong mid-funnel campaign impacted bottom funnel metrics like site visitation or even something like e-commerce?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So one great example of how mid-funnel campaigns can drive bottom funnel outcomes comes from a podcast advertising campaign we measured for a leading audio platform and their online retail client. So the leading audio platform, I'm sure most of you can probably guess, as most people are on it, but the campaign was really designed to build consideration and brand perception across two key product categories. But what made it so powerful is that it didn't stop at awareness or intent. It actually translated directly into behavior. So in the styles category, the campaign drove, I think it was about a 47% lift in branded search activity and a 57% lift in site visitation. That's real consumer action moving from interest to exploration. And in parts and accessory in the parts and accessories category, site visits jumped from 50%, and the campaign saw strong engagement across younger audiences who were clearly motivated to learn more. So this is a clear case of mid-funnel messaging focused on familiarity, consideration, fueling lower funnel performance. It's proof that the brand and the performance marketing, aren't really separate lanes. They're actually part of the same continuum. And when you measure across full funnel, you can see how brand building efforts and those efforts directly contribute to conversions.
Okay. Well, how would you recommend that brands structure their learning agendas or experimentation framework to connect awareness and favorability metrics to actual sales behavior over time?
Absolutely. It really starts with adopting an always-on ad measurement approach. I mentioned Evergreen early on because if you're only measuring at the end of the campaign, you're missing valuable opportunities to learn and improve in real time. So brands should work with measurement partners that can connect exposure to real outcomes like site visits, search behavior, and e-commerce. So you're not just looking at awareness and favorability, but understanding how those upper and mid-funnel efforts translate into real behavior over time. So when it comes to structuring a learning agenda, we recommend starting with a clear set of questions tied to business objectives. For example, does your creative A or B drive more favorability? Does increased frequency drive purchase intent among new customers? What channels are best at converting awareness into action and for the audience you're trying to reach? And then you use those questions to really inform what you're measuring, when, and essentially how. Right. So the goal is to treat each campaign not just as a performance exercise, but really as an experiment that builds on the last piece of data that you received or saw, right? That's how brands create a feedback loop between brand and performance and get smarter over time. It's the full journey across platforms, media that really makes the difference. And if there's 17 ad exposures, not just 3 on one platform, you need to know that. And I think you need to track exposure to the ad and also post to see what the full journey really looks like and if you've made a difference. And that's really what DISQO does from start to finish.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. So I have one more question for you at the end of this fireside chat. Before we get into the questions from our audience, I would love you to look into your crystal ball for this one. What is one shift that you think more marketers will need to make and how they plan and measure campaigns over the next year, especially in the light of today's complicated economic and regulatory environments? We keep hearing about AI, cookies, tariffs. It's something new every single day. What do you think?
Yes. So I guess I have to always look forward in these conversations, and that's for sure. I don't have a crystal ball, but there's no doubt that marketers are navigating one of the most unpredictable environments, I think that we've really seen in years. Uh, you know, AI is evolving daily and reshaping everything from creative development to media buying. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention cookie deprecation and Google's recent decision here, but that continues to be a moving target. Google's latest announcement, added even more uncertainty. And economic factors like tariffs are making advertisers cautious, obviously, with their budgets. I think right now we haven't seen a big shift so far in the market, but there's always the looming impact of tariffs and decisions made around those tariffs on a global basis. So what's the shift that marketers need to make? It really kind of comes down to, in our opinion, and in my opinion, I think resilience through measurement. I think the first one is brands need to adapt a more comprehensive cross-platform measurement approach that gives them visibility into how these macro shifts are impacting their campaigns in real time. When you can see what's working, where and why, you're always in a better position to adjust and really stay ahead of those shifts in the market. I think the second one is at the same time, marketers need to double down on privacy safe, identity powered solutions. Relying on cookies or temporary workarounds just won't cut it. That might be obvious to most of us, but the brands that are future proofing now by building, their own benchmarks and investing in people-based measurement, those will be the brands that are best equipped to navigate whatever comes next. So.
Those are great points. It's certainly keeping us all on our toes, isn't it? On a daily
Indeed.
basis.
Indeed.
You have to sleep with one eye open almost.
Right.
Well, Sean, this our chat was a lot of fun. Thank you so much. You provided, I think, so much additional context to all of the great data that you shared at the top of today's session. So thank you so much. And I want to give a thanks to our audience for being so vocal with us in the chat. There's still time. If you have questions for Sean, please continue to put them in the chat and we'll get to as many as we can. Sean, let's get to the first question that came in. How can advertisers demonstrate the value of brand investment when budget holders are demanding near-term ROI?
It's an excellent question. I think this is one of the toughest challenges I think that marketers face today. Justifying brand investment when there's pressure to really deliver immediate ROI. I think we all know this. We all know this pressure, and we all know this story. But our data shows that long-term brand building and short-term performance aren't at odds. They're deeply connected. So if you look at our brand maturity benchmarks, the relationship becomes clearer, right? Brands with high awareness, those in the established tier, as I was mentioning, consistently outperform others on lower funnel outcomes like purchase intent, site visitation, and e-commerce activity. And that's because brand awareness doesn't just live at the top of the funnel, it fuels the entire thing. So if you stop investing in awareness, you risk shrinking the pool of people who can even consider your brand, which ultimately depresses your conversion rates, right? So I think it's important to focus on that. And that's why having a full funnel measurement approach is essential. You need to see how upper funnel efforts are contributing to performance outcomes over time. And you can't do that without an always-on measurement solution or position. So you need to know essentially where you are, what's working, and how your brand health is influencing behavior. It's the only way to defend brand investment with data and to plan with confidence in today's economic environment.
Yeah, good tips. I have a clarifying question for you from one of our viewers who had a question on the category slides that you had at the beginning of the show. Can you give a couple of examples of what kinds of brands are in goods and consumables within those categories that you mentioned?
Yeah, sure. So one of the I guess examples that we use is that consumables space, and it's a lot of the typical CPG brands that you might see in the market. The Krogers of the world, or if you want to call it fast moving consumer goods in the international markets. But it tends to be the over the counter brands that drive that particular behavior in that particular category. So we see a lot there in terms of the CPG market focusing on lower funnel, and then also really kind of driving the consumables market as a whole.
All right, thanks for expanding on that. I actually have another category question for you. Our viewer wants to know if the category benchmark guides explain where the strategy or KPI should be focused, or are there metrics available that share more about where each category is likely to move?
That's a great question. So that while they do show from a categorical perspective recommendations, we do have deeper cuts of data that we can actually provide. So I think using the benchmark deeper cuts by industry platform or audience segment also help us there. So we can definitely provide a deeper view into some of those categorical benchmarks that I provided there, and we can also go into cross-platform or cross-channel as well to show how that influences the category in addition to those benchmarks that I presented.
Okay, thank you for that. All
Sure.
right, a few specific social media questions have also come in. How can my company stand out and turn clicks into customers using social?
Great question. So I think the one of the keys for social media obviously is the fact that we want to always take a look at social benchmarks, because that market is continuously evolving as we all know, right? It's very dynamic. So I think one of the critical pieces there is, and I was mentioning in the outset of the presentation, is that while I'm providing benchmarks on a social basis, I think one of the critical areas that we would focus on is each social platform is different. A lot of them actually focus on obviously behaviors that we see in the market from a platform perspective, but you want to take a look at the deeper cut in social and also match it up to your individual KPIs. So I think we actually see that social media outperforms cross-channel across all KPIs, and that's critical really for individual performance as we look at social.
Okay, so I have another viewer who said that they read a recent stat that much of the buyer journey is on private networks or dark social. How can they capture brand awareness and sentiment?
Interesting. I'm not sure what dark social might mean, but all that said, we because our audience has downloaded the metering app on our technology, we're able to show almost anywhere they go with regard to the journey, also see their behaviors, and also what they're clicking on. So the key for us is really taking that data, whether that be, I guess, visiting a dark social site, and or relating that back to what your individual KPIs might be for a campaign. So again, I think focusing on or level setting against your own personal benchmarks and not just the social category in general, and campaign benchmarks are critical there. I'm not quite sure what dark social means, but all that said, we can see the journey from start to finish, given the fact that they've downloaded and consented to the tracking app that they've downloaded on our site.
Okay, thank you. Our next viewer says, if we're continuously updating benchmarks, is there a difference to simply looking at historical performance? Is that still a true benchmark?
Yes, actually, great question. So I think in terms of historical benchmarks, I think it's important to understand that if you're going back, and as I mentioned in the beginning of as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, if you're looking at benchmarks that are, call it 10 to 15 years old, benchmarking against an outdated benchmark can actually lead you astray. So we try and focus a little bit on the updated, a little bit more on the updated benchmarks, which is why we do 2021 and looking forward there. So updating benchmarks, always resetting, taking a look at the market, site visitation, cross-channel visitation. What are some of the factors that actually change those benchmarks? And then relating it back to your individual KPIs and campaign performance is always critical there. So looking at the most updated data is really what the recommendation would be.
All right. Well, thank you for that. All right. We have time for one more question. As new and emerging brands focus so heavily on CAC or customer acquisition costs, how do you suggest they showcase the need for top or mid funnel? How would you educate execs that CAC is not the only metric, and what metrics are the impacts on CAC as you go up the funnel?
Right. So it's an excellent question. I think that one of those critical areas for us is looking at the entire funnel, right? And I know that CAC is always a metric that is focused on and ROI, but I think those brand maturity benchmarks are a really good illustration of how we do things. And how we're looking at it from an overall perspective, and then relating that back to whatever the KPIs it is that you're measuring. That be ROI, if that's ROAS, if that's CAC, whatever that might be. I think it's critical to actually understand the full funnel impact and how that looks, and take into consideration each part of that funnel: consideration, awareness, intent, purchase, and then relate it all back to whatever the KPIs that you're actually looking at, and making sure that you're looking at it from that perspective.
Very helpful. Always good to know how to communicate that to senior executives. So, Sean, thank you so much for being here. For me especially, this was a lot of fun having this conversation with you, seeing all of the great data that you had at the top. And of course, thank you so much to our audience for all of those questions that you sent in. Sean, it was really great to be with you.
Thank you, Marissa. Really enjoyed it, and have a fantastic day.
Well, thank you so much. But don't go anywhere. Before we wrap up, I'm just going to take a moment to tell you about what's happening across eMarketer's media channels. The eMarketer Virtual Summit is back next Friday, May 9th. So join our principal analyst, Sarah Marzano, and others, including me, as we break down the trends, strategies, and innovations shaping commerce media, excuse me. You'll hear from marketers at PepsiCo, Kettle & Fire, Mave, Chase, Walmart Connect, and also Google. Register today on our events page at emarketer.com/events. And of course, while you're on that page, you can also register for more webinars just like this one. Don't forget to check out our various podcasts. We have Behind the Numbers, Reimagining Retail, and the Banking and Payments Show, which you can listen to anywhere you find podcasts and also watch on Spotify and eMarketer's YouTube channel. Finally, please subscribe to our newsletters. Thank you all for joining us today. And thanks again to Sean, the team at DISQO, and our eMarketer studio team behind the scenes for making this webinar possible. We'll see you all on the next Tech Talk.